Hi everybody, welcome to Tell Me in 10. Today we're joined by Iain Hesketh, who many of you will know, but he is the Elim Missions Director, International Missions Director. And so he's going to join us, he's going to answer our 10 questions. But I'm just going to hand over to Iain just to introduce himself and tell us a little bit about his family. Hi Iain.
Yeah, hi Adam, thanks for this opportunity. It's great to be with you today. So I'm married to Rachel, who's a Yorkshire lass. We've been married coming up to, this is a test,
Oh gosh,
16 years this year.
go with it.
Yeah, we'll stick with 16. We've got two kids, Hannah and Sarah. Hannah's 8, Sarah's 6, and so it's a real fun and full life for us at the moment with young family.
Yeah, joys of homeschooling, etc.
Yeah. I'd like to say that I'm heavily involved in that, but I can't because I'm not. I've got work to do. So
we're hiding out of the way most of this.
Yeah.
Excellent. So we're going to answer the questions. Some people have seen these interviews before. We'll pick up on some points as we go. But Iain, could you just tell me, were you born, your journey of faith, were you born into a church-going family, or did you come to faith a bit later in life? How did it work?
Yeah, born into a Christian home, really feel really privileged in that respect. So my mum and dad were part of the Elim Church in St Helens under the leadership of David Tinian and Steve Derbyshire back in the 80s when the church was actually listed as one of the top 10 growing churches. So that was our home church. So yeah, grew up in that environment of real faith, expectation, and people coming to faith in Jesus. So that was part of the early story, and mum and dad sort of lived it really. So around the age of, I think it was around the age of between 5 and 7. I can't exactly remember exactly, but I do remember coming home from an evening service. Mum and dad were morning and evening, that kind of thing, and I do remember, just about as I was going to bed, mum putting me and my brother to bed at that night actually, and just asking Mum, what's this Christian thing about? What do I need to do? And so she just explained the gospel, and that was that. I made a childlike profession of faith, and that kind of continued, I guess, from up until around sort of the teenage years when.
Was there a wobble in the teenage years?
No, I wouldn't say too big a wobble. I think people have had far worse than me. I think, but there was something about the faith becoming my own, and I think there was a period of time where I probably wasn't quite as committed as a follower of Jesus as I look back and think, oh, maybe did I waste some years? But I don't think God wastes anything. And but there was definitely a decisive moment when I was around 17 and a half, 18 maybe, where I just really encountered with the Holy Spirit, actually after a night out with some of my mates, surprisingly. Came back in and just God had sort of rested my heart, and real conviction of just the direction of my life, and waywardness from Him in the innermost part. I was never really that bad, to be fair, but there was that defining moment for me that I look back and say that's when it really changed significantly for me.
And I came to faith later in life, mid-20s, so I can't imagine being 17, 18, 19 trying to be a Christian and that tension. So I'm not surprised people do have little wobbles of varying degrees at that time. How did you know that you were called into ministry? How did that work for you?
I mean, that's interesting, because I think that's something that has grown over the years. There's a definite call. I think the assurance of that, or the working out of that, to pursue this kind of life and ministry, came as I stepped into it, if I'm honest. But I remember there was a period of time in my life. My mum and dad had actually moved up to Scotland. I was living in Derby at the time, and Mark Pugh was my youth pastor. And my my dream from like maybe 5 years old, even maybe before that, was to join the police service. I wanted to be a policeman. I wanted to drive fast cars. I wanted to nick bad people. I wanted to get into a few tussles, and be the kind of the hero. So that was the dream right the way up until I just got a real sense of God's call, and it began with Mark Pugh actually asking me a question.
Okay.
So he just said, have you ever thought about ministry?
Yeah.
And up until that point, I had absolutely no intention of going into ministry. My dad was an Elim minister at the time, and I just thought, no chance. Really.
See what happens.
Yeah, it's like, why would I want to do that? But I do remember my mum asking me a question again, just prior to this, maybe a few months prior to this question. Yeah. And she said, well, what if God calls you into ministry? What if God calls you or asks you to do something different with your life? And my response was, well, not ever anticipating that would be so. Well, I suppose I'll have to do it then, won't I? Sort of response.
Yeah.
And little did I realise that actually, with that question that Mark asked, it would begin a very different trajectory for my life. And so that's where it started, and it was confirmed, really confirmed with when Steve Kempton actually preached a message about Peter stepping out the boat, and I decided to push that, that thought and call for ministry and training for ministry on to another year, and see what happens. But he just he used this phrase, what if next year never comes? And it was that phrase, because I'd thought of that phrase, I'd said that phrase in my mind, and it was like a punch in the stomach at that point. And I just knew that the Holy Spirit was stirring some stuff in me, and I needed to respond. So that's where it began, and thankfully Mark Pugh saw something in me and backed that call, and with the blessing of the Derby Church, went off to Bible college, and that was that.
So have you worked in secular work as well, or have you always been in a ministry context?
No, so during A levels and sort of that sort of 2-year period of A level time, and prior and up until about the age of 20 when I went to Bible college, I worked for the co-op actually. It began as a shelf stacker, and then got to the dizzy heights of a grocery supervisor.
Fantastic.
I know, yeah. And actually have been set to go onto some management training program prior to going to college. And I also had a part-time job working for a firm that is no longer in existence, actually, called Securicor. Used to do logistics and deliveries, and so that was a few years of life in the real world, as they say.
Yeah. Excellent. Cool. So a question that a few people have they've all answered it in slightly different ways, but do you have a favorite book of the Bible, and if so, why?
Yeah. I mean, the standard answer is I love it all.
Yeah. Which is the one I would go for.
I think from each book of the Bible, you can gather and gain something clearly different. I think try and look for Jesus on every page is important. But if I had to pick one, it would be the Gospel of John.
Okay.
It would be the Gospel of John then. So I'm just on our missions page, I'm doing a daily devotional through the Gospel of John, and I love the depth of the text. I think John is a clever writer. I love the way that you can read it. I've been reading through it, and I reckon if I read through it again next year or later on this year, I'll glean some more because of the richness and the depth of the text. I think he just draws you to Jesus as the source of life, and I love that. That this hope and life is found in Jesus and Jesus alone. But I also really appreciate the missional thrust of John's Gospel. So it's this call to know Jesus and abide in Jesus and be formed by him in the context of community, and drawn into the life of Jesus and the Godhead, actually. But then it's the sending out, the thrust that this life that we have is for the benefit of the world. And so if I had to choose one,
Yeah.
it would be John's Gospel.
Yeah, and I've just been drawn back to I think it's John 15, where and some definitions there of what it means to be a disciple. I think you were at a conference, at the Bonhoeffer conference last year, where the guy just unpacked some verses in John 15 about being a disciple. Just so powerful. Different story, different day. But,
I mean, we could go off on a whole tangent there, Adam. But must be disciplined.
Yes, yeah. So, can you just tell us a little bit about what you've done in ministry and finishing with what you currently do?
Yeah, so life began in terms of full-time ministry opportunity at a church in Reading it's now called All Nations Christian Centre, and still led by Billy Fenning, who is just an absolute hero. You know, so it was called St. Saviour's at the time, and he took this risk on a fresh-faced, you know, young and naive, you know, graduate from Elim Bible College. And I had 4 fantastic years in Reading, just such a great church, and you know, responsibility for the youth work along with a whole load of other things. And you know, had the privilege of forming a team and seeing a youth work and youth ministry grow. So started with around 12, I think, young people when I first arrived at the church, and by the time we left, it was, you know, into its 70s or 80s in terms of the number of young people that we were connecting with. But the big thing for me was not the numbers of the young people, was the formation of a team of people, engaging them in ministry and distributing, identifying their skills really. So that for me was a really clarifying moment about the shape of ministry to come for me. So then moved to a place called West Bromwich, which is in the West Midlands.
Not far from us.
Not far at all, and had. It's nearly 7 years there of a great time. Again, you know, I was 28 at the time. I'd been married probably a couple of years, I think, by the time I moved to West Bromwich, and you know, just great admiration for them taking the risk on this. Again, this 28 naive young whippersnapper who they invited in to be part of their community. And I learned so much really about discipleship and mission and leadership in those days as we journeyed together. I learned what it looked like to love people, not to use people, you know, for my own ministry platform or whatever. It really became a formation point. So the ministry in West Bromwich was formative for me, and hopefully for them as a church, you know. And so 7 years, and that's where like the discipleship piece really for me began to really crystallize. It had been forming in Reading, but you know, I'll talk about one of the people who influenced me most, and it was during this time that that discipleship called it, you know, of what it means to form disciples really emerged. And then 6 years in Sellyoak in Maldwyn Jones. You know, I followed Maldwyn Jones. He finished one Sunday and I started the next. There wasn't much of a turnaround, and again, just it was a brilliant experience. You know, I loved the church and I loved the people, and one of the things for me in terms of every location I've been in, it's been a wrench to leave. It's never been like an easy choice. And so the continuation of the forming disciples, what that looks like, really came into the fore in Sellyoak. My thought processes have been formed even further around that, and leadership style, and so that the thrust really for me has always been about equipping and empowering people to be all that God's called them to be, and I can trace that all the way through you know, the ministry journey so far. And so then stepping into this role, you know, without responsibility for a local church in the same way, missionaries scattered all over the globe. You know, so my congregation is scattered all the time. What does that look like? And then, the ministry, I think, now is a continuation of what has been. So I think in order to fulfill what I'm doing now, and what God's requiring of me in this moment, I can't neglect what happened in the past,
No.
because it's the formation of my story and heart and passion and desire. And so, yeah, stepping into this, it's how do we release more people? How do we train more people? How do we equip more people? How do we send more disciple makers than ever before? How do we empower our missionaries and help our missionaries and serve our missionaries to be all that God has called? So I kind of just see this thread of very much this sense to empower others.
Yeah. And I think I'm right in saying when you were at Selly Oak, you had Jack and Annie with you, and did you planted launched a second site there, didn't you? So sending people out there.
So what happened there was Jack and Annie were with me for pretty much most of my time actually in Selly Oak. They joined maybe a year. No, Annie joined 9 months after I'd started in Selly Oak. She came on team, and then Jack came as a student. Over the course of the 5 year, the remaining sort of 5 years or so, this opportunity came up with Wheelie Castle. The previous pastor had moved on. Gordon Neil had asked us, because he was the regional leader at the time, asked if we'd just give some oversight and some support, and the relationship just developed really between us and Wheelie Castle, so it came about that they became part of us, and the goal and the objective was to establish a strong work there as a mission base and hub for work into Wheelie Castle and beyond. So that kind of took us by surprise, but it was a great opportunity.
But fits with your picture of reaching out and
really it doesn't. And I think that was the key thing. I do love gathering together, but I just my thinking around this. So what are we called to do? We're called to populate the earth. Actually the gospel mandate is to make disciples everywhere as you go. And so how do we do that? Well, we're not, from our perspective, we were never going to reach South Birmingham in partnership with the other churches. Some great churches in South Birmingham. So it was never just about, an Elim Selly Oak thing, or Encounter churches are now called. It was very much, how are we going to reach the unreached people? How are we going to, and it's about getting these hubs. For me, it was about getting hubs into communities that would be light in the area. So very, very much sits with the story.
Absolutely superb. And so who, aside from Jesus, because that should be the standard answer for any minister, has influenced you the most in your ministry?
It's great, isn't it? I mean, it goes without saying, Jesus, absolutely, but Jesus uses people. I found, and so there has been, over the years, there have been some really key influences. I mentioned Billy. I think that Billy Fenning has been an influence in my life, particularly when it comes to faith and trusting God with finances. Some of his experience there and some of the journey, the story just really had a powerful impact upon my life. Again, during those days, Mark Ryan was really key, really crucial. He was very kind to me and just gave me time and space. And more recently, in particular, I mentioned that West Bromwich period of time. I reached out to Neil Hudson to be my mentor as part of the Emerging Leaders program. And Neil had been my tutor at college, lecturer at college, so Neil was really helpful in just formulating whole life discipleship, a theology around whole life discipleship, and the impact of that understanding around leadership and empowering and equipping. There's authors that I could list that have been distant mentors and influences in my life. People like Eugene Peterson or Mike Breen and Jeff Van der Stel and other theologians that would enable me to think. But I think in more recent years, Darren Johnson in Warrington has been a really key influence in terms of just some of my thinking and coaching and development. And so it's hard to just pin one, Adam, because I want to learn from as many people as possible, but really allow some key influences to shape who out of who I am and who I believe God's calling me to be, so that I can I can be who God's designed. And then there are, the friends that I made at Bible college that are just lifelong friends who provoke me and annoy me in equal measure sometimes, and they'll know who they are.
Yeah.
But they've walked alongside and seen the way that God has worked in their lives through some really, really great highs and some incredible lows. And so they're lifers. They're people that will influence me for the rest of life, really.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that's come across in these interviews that we've done, is that it is more than one person that influences you, and it's having that broad input, isn't it, and broad experiences, because some people will be strong in one area and other people will be strong in another. Right. So I think having all those people feed in is so good. So as we're filming or recording this, we're still in the throes of the COVID-19 pandemic, still pretty much worldwide. Outside of COVID-19, what is the most challenging thing about your role? So prior to March, or whenever it all started to kick off, wherever you are, what was the most challenging thing?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I've reflected on that. There are many challenges, to be honest. If there was one challenge that I would highlight, would be the sense of cohesion. So, or the challenge to bring cohesive vision. So one of the strengths of us as a movement is that we're very permissioning, and everybody, there's real license and liberty to experiment and try some things. And so we have lots of people doing mission all over, which is great, and actually that takes its form in lots of different ways and different projects and different ideas. And so whilst we would never want to do that, because I'm all about releasing, empowering, equipping, I think what I've identified is the struggle to bring a sense of, this is why we exist.
Yeah.
So, and this has been an age-old problem, I think, or not problem, tension would probably be the better word actually for Elim missions, is because most mission organizations would sit outside of denominational structures, whereas we sit within a denominational structure and we serve a movement. And so what does that look like then? Because our posture is that of serving a particular group. So the frustration or the tension, if you like, of are we a facilitating body? Do we just facilitate other people's mission, or are we to cast some vision? Are we? What's the role, and how do we hold those two things in tension? So I think that sense of cohesion has been a challenge. I'm pretty confident I'm there with the sense of what I sense the Lord asking of us as Elim and Elim missions together, that will still give great liberty and freedom of expression, but to join it together in, this is what we're going to go for. And that's been helped really by the 4 priorities that Chris has brought to us, the reaching nations. So if we're going to reach nations, then we've got to be about pioneering. We've got to be about initiating movements in every nation with our partners and in new opportunities. And I think together that can bring a sense of, okay, this is what we're going to go for, and then creativity as to what that looks like.
I was just sitting here thinking, as you were saying about cohesion, I was thinking, I'm so glad that's not Michael Job.
Yeah. I mean, but that, to be honest, Adam, the challenge. I love challenges.
Yeah.
I love the challenge of that, even though sometimes it's just it's a bit of a mind bender, because how does this all work out? And stepping into a role,
cross culture as well,
cross culture globally, but also within Elim, there's different cultures and approaches and theology behind that. So, but I love it. I love the challenge, honestly.
So, what is the most enjoyable thing about your current role?
Yeah, the cohesion.
Good answer.
I think the most enjoyable. I mean, I love working with people. I love networking. Not just networking for the sake of it. I love networking people together to achieve a goal. And so I think the the most enjoyable thing for me is that you know, I know a lot of people within the movement and beyond, and I'm just getting this sense of, with clarity of vision and direction going forward, of being able to pull people together to achieve the goal, because we're clear on the goal. It's really hard to network people when you don't know what you're networking people for, you know, or there's no clarity of this is why we're coming together. And I really believe that when we gather around an objective, it gives strength to the relationship. It gives purpose to the network. It gives people a real sense of clarity about the things that they bring into the mix. And so I'm enjoying that. I'm enjoying that prospect of, you know, resourcing and networking and releasing ministry and missionaries to see the kingdom of God extended. I think that we've got some great days behind us. You know, really have. There's some real high points within Elim Missions world, but you know, as a movement as well, I think. And I really think that the days ahead of us, from a global perspective, are really exciting if we can pull together behind the sense of let's reach nations.
And so, just picking up on that, you use that word networking. How do you find, as representing Elim Missions, you get a chance to talk to AOG missionaries and to heads of AOG missions and other denominations? Is there that kind of global pulling together?
Yeah, there is, and I think that we've definitely seen. I've definitely had that opportunity to connect with people from different organisations and different streams, and I think the thing for me is to be really strategic in those connections, and it's be friendly with everyone. You know, be kind to everyone, and champion those who are making much of Jesus. But I think for us as a movement, we'd be really well served to make some of those strategic connections, that people who do things that we don't do. And so I think, again, I'm just really keen for us as Elim Missions to identify that this is what we do. This is what we bring to the party, and other people who do things better than we do. Like, is there an opportunity there for a partnership that enables a greater strength for the mission ahead? So connecting with people has been really important. I do actually know the missions director for the AOG, but we've been trying to get our diaries to coincide since he took on the role, and it's just been an absolute nightmare. But that is certainly in the plan to meet with them.
Cool. So, if you could go back in time and picture a young Iain Hesketh setting out in ministry, what bit of advice would a more mature Iain Hesketh give a young Iain Hesketh?
Yeah, it's great question. I love it. I would say to a young Iain, don't be too concerned about what other people are doing and what God is asking them. You just get on with what I've asked you to do. I think early on, from my own perspective, it was very easy to see the opportunity that other people had, and often we compare our opportunities with others, and we think, oh, I wish I was there. Failing to realize that actually other people might be looking at you going, oh, I wish I was there, or I wish I did that. And excuse me, I just think comparison is a killer.
Okay, yeah.
I think when we compare what we have with other people, it just kills any motivation and movement, and it kills any growth opportunity in us, because all we do is end up looking at others. And so I would say to a young Iain, don't champion other people. Like, be super generous to what God's interested to other people, but give yourself fully to what I've asked of you. So I would go back. That's what I would say. I think, just don't get caught up in the comparison game, because it's just really, really unhealthy.
And that comparison is a killer is going to stick out for me, definitely. That was
And the other thing, I think, Adam, just on that, in terms of, I think when we compare to other people, it steals us of joy.
Yeah.
And it steals us of a thankfulness in our own walk and own heart that really just does something horrible to us. And so I think when we can view what we have with thankfulness, God unleashes something in us that could never happen if we were just stuck in that comparison mode.
Absolutely. I mean, I think with where we are with everybody doing so much online, it's so easy to compare because you can see those numbers. Oh, look how many people are watching that. Look at me. Yeah, I'm getting 10. So you actually get very disheartened if you go around comparing yourself. So
that's right.
It's a good word. So it would be remiss not to talk about where we are at the moment in the middle of this pandemic. What challenges and opportunities do you see for Elim Missions and for the broader church?
Yeah, I mean, again, this is it's a great question, and sometimes I'm loath to answer because I just wonder whether it is too soon to answer some of those. But I think, what do I think?
Maybe it is too soon.
Yeah, I think, Adam, we've got this opportunity to reevaluate what was. I think nobody anticipated everything to stop quite in the way that it has.
Yeah.
I've been inspired by the way that people have quickly adapted methods. I think one of the things that will hit us in terms of missions will be potentially the way that we send people in the future.
Okay.
Which it doesn't mean to say it'll slow down. I think I'm believing that actually there might be some increase. It just means that we might not just send them from the UK. We might send them from Elim across the globe, sending people. I think there's going to undoubtedly be some financial challenges that we will face, which might mean that we'll need to reevaluate some of the things that we do. And I think there might be a call to simplicity. So I don't know what you maybe remember what life was like prior to COVID-19, and my life was pretty crazy, Adam. I've got to be honest.
Imagine.
I think in a 12-month period, maybe did 12 overseas, 12 countries. Daily commute of an hour to and from the office. Evening Skype calls, daily Skype calls, early mornings, late nights. Life was bonkers. So I think the question in this season that I'm asking for us as missions and for me personally is, what are the things from prior to COVID-19 do I want to keep? And what are the things that actually I want to change? And I think there's a simplicity to our life that God has graced us for at this moment to reevaluate some stuff. And I think that's on all the different levels. I think it's personally, I think it's church, I think it's nationally, regionally, globally. What are the opportunities? What's God asking of us? And let's do that. And I do think I think simplicity is probably one of the key things for me.
Yeah, and there is that opportunity to not restart some things, isn't there? Because there's been that break. It really is. You don't have to re-pick it up. You can just say, leave it back there, and that's it.
I think there's an opportunity for new wine actually in this day, and it's not to say that the old stuff we're just going to chuck out. I think there's a responsibility for us to manage the tension between what was and what will be. And this is going to be a bit of a journey for many, to be honest. And so we need to walk with sensitivity and openness and responsiveness to God over and above everything else. And maybe this is an opportunity for us to identify those sacred cows that we all said that we don't have, but we really do. And kill them. And be brave enough to kill them in order that we might do the things that we're required to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've touched a little bit on this, but do you think when this is all over, it's going to be back to the way it was? I think you've probably answered a fair bit.
Maybe, yeah. I no,
No.
but I don't think everything will go. I think I do think we'll have a simpler church.
Yeah.
I think what we've realised, and I think we'll have a more technologically advanced approach to mission and ministry.
Yeah.
I think we'll realise that we did some things that we didn't need to do in person that we can do
Absolutely.
on video call.
Yeah.
I think the level of training and equipping will be able to be increased. So I'm already thinking about what does this look like for us globally. Like, so often we would have had to pay, like, spend thousands of pounds to get to a location to then do some training and equipping. But actually, how effectively can you do equipping in a week?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's like, actually equipping is show me how to do this. Let me show you, and then the accountability. And so I think there's with Zoom and technology, we're able to deliver some of the teaching content for sure, but we're able to then ask the questions of accountability because we can meet far more regularly without impact on time or cost. So I think there's an opportunity for us as church leaders in these days to simplify things a lot. And then the other thing I think is going to be really crucial, I don't just say this because I'm the missions guy, but I do believe that there's a gathering around mission like never before. So I think whereas previously the organizing principle has been how do we get more people into our churches, and how do we add, I think the organizing principle for the next season and the next post-COVID is mission. How do we send more people? How do we multiply our effectiveness? How do we release more missionaries? How do we equip more and missionary? I use missionary in the biggest sense, because I actually think the New Testament knows nothing of an unsent believer.
No.
Like, so the it's just a case of where are you going to be sent? And so I think there's a probably an increased emphasis upon local. So I'm even finding that personally, like actually being local, I getting to know people. I'm actually getting to know the names of my neighbors rather than just a little wave as I leave early in the morning or come back at night, and but also a global reach. So I think mission, I think it was Kerry Newhoff who put something out recently, just in the last few days on Twitter, that actually churches that don't gather around mission in this next season are going to be the churches that are going to struggle the most. But churches that reprioritize the mission over and above everything else, I think we'll go into thriving mode. Like, if we try and cling on to stuff, that's when we lose it. But if we give it, and if we live large, and if we live beyond ourselves, I think that's the kind of church that I see in the future, a church that's thriving in God, not because we've got massive buildings, but because we're seeing people come to Jesus like never before, because we've organized around the mission.
Excellent. Iain, I'm going to throw in a bonus question. So this is now, tell me in 10 with a second bit. What book are you reading at the moment?
Okay. So I'll tell you a book that I've just read, which is amazing. It's called Movements That Change the World by Steve Addison. Okay. Really, really great book. And then the other book that I'm reading, just started, is Turn the Ship. And I can't remember the name of the author, but it's basically the story of a naval captain in the US who took on a failing ship, and in 2 years completely transformed the culture to an empowering culture. So the Navy, top down, follow a leader kind of structure, and he just completely turned that on its head, and it was a leader environment. And so that I'm really enjoying that book. It's about empowering and equipping and shaping and leadership, and leading of leaders. It's a great book.
Excellent. Oh, well, we'll link to those in the comments afterwards. So Iain, thank you so much for being so generous with your time this morning. Some great stuff in there, and so thank you and God bless.
Thank you so much, Adam.